Gemini, be very careful with a woman. I will tell you why. I want you to take a moment, breathe deeply, and slow down the rhythm of your thoughts, because what I'm about to share is not just information. It's a spiritual alert meant for your protection, your peace, and ultimately, your evolution. There's a woman in your life, or entering it, whose presence may seem harmless, even warm at first glance. She might smile easily, offer her time, or surround herself with stories that pull on your compassion. But behind this gentle exterior, there may be something else at work. An energy of distortion, an invisible weight, a subtle erosion of your emotional clarity. Gemini, you have a brilliant mind and an open heart. You love deeply, but you live largely through curiosity and movement. You're quick to listen, quick to empathize, and even quicker to adapt. And this, dear soul, is where your greatest light becomes your greatest vulnerability. The energy I speak of is not loud, but it is real. And the universe is nudging you now to pay attention, not to be afraid, not to judge, but to discern. To come back to your center, to remember what your intuition has been trying to tell you behind the noise of daily life. If this message already feels like a subtle confirmation, if a specific face comes to mind, stay with me. And if you find healing here, feel free to like, share, or subscribe so we can walk this road of truth and protection together. Let's begin with what you may have been sensing, but not yet naming. Gate 1, the hidden distortion. When a woman's energy quietly unbalances you. Gemini, some storms don't come with thunder. Some arrive with silence. A soft voice, a warm smile, a comforting tone. You let your guard down, not because you're naive, but because you see the best in people. Because your nature is to explore, to connect, to understand. And yet, not every connection is made of light. There is a woman in your life, or perhaps on the outskirts of it, whose energy feels a little off. Maybe it's not clear at first. You can't point to anything obvious. She's kind, helpful, maybe even generous. But still, something inside of you tightens when you speak to her. Something inside of you pulls back, even as your mind says, she means well. That tension, Gemini, is your nervous system recognizing what your mind is trying to rationalize away. You're not imagining it. This woman may not intend to harm you. She may not even realize the way her presence seeps into your clarity. But the impact remains. You may notice that after spending time with her, you feel drained, scattered, foggy, doubtful of choices that once felt clear. Or worse, you begin to question yourself. Was I too sensitive? Too judgmental? No, love. You were too open. I once worked with a Gemini woman named Soline, an incredibly intuitive entrepreneur who had recently brought on a business partner who seemed like the perfect match. Organized, polished, always offering advice. But within weeks, Soline stopped sleeping well. Her creativity dulled. She began second-guessing every business decision and even pulled back from opportunities she had long worked for. I thought I was just overwhelmed, she said. But it wasn't mine. It was hers. Her doubts. Her energy. Her control wrapped in kindness. That's what energetic distortion often looks like: support on the surface, but control underneath. This woman in your life might be subtle in her influence. She may use guilt rather than force. Advice that sounds helpful, but makes you feel small. She may frequently compare you to others, wrapped in passive phrases like, "I'm just saying this because I care," or "You remind me so much of someone who messed up." And because you're Gemini, because you listen, because you care, you absorb it. You don't fight. You reflect. And in doing so, you begin to doubt. But not anymore. Gemini, your soul is too precious to be a canvas for someone else's projections. And this isn't about blaming. This is about recognizing the weight you've been carrying that never belonged to you. Energetic manipulation doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like overhelping. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism. Sometimes it looks like a person who's always in crisis and always needs you to fix it. You may have been placed in the role of the fixer, the rescuer, the emotional container for someone else's chaos. And while you may wear that role well on the outside, inside you are wilting. You are shrinking. You are forgetting the sound of your own voice. So, I'm here to remind you, your intuition was right all along. That tight feeling in your chest after she speaks? That's real. That resistance you feel when you see her name on your phone? That's real. That exhaustion after every meeting, call, or text? That's real. You've been emotionally overdrawn, Gemini, and this woman, knowingly or not, is feeding from the credit of your light. She may not be evil. She may not even be aware. But the universe doesn't measure intention. It measures impact. And the impact on you has been silence. You've stopped expressing your truth freely. You've started walking on eggshells around her. You've learned to shrink your voice just to avoid her passive corrections, her sideways glances, her veiled comparisons. You may have even started to believe the lies. That you are messy, unreliable, scattered. But darling, those words don't belong to you. They were handed to you by someone who needed to feel powerful and who saw your empathy as an opening. Now, it's time to take it back. This is your awakening. Not to react in anger, but to return to yourself in strength. You don't need to fight her. You don't need to confront. You only need to unplug. To remove your energetic cord from her field and place it back into your own body. You can still be kind, but you must be clear. You can still offer support, but you must stop sacrificing your peace. Because the truth is, Gemini, you are not too sensitive. You are finely tuned. And the more you honor that sensitivity, the more powerful you become. So take a moment now. Ask yourself, who leaves you confused after every interaction? Who feels like they're helping, but somehow always makes you feel like less? Who smiles, but leaves shadows in your heart? That woman? She's your mirror, and she's your teacher. Not because you must follow her, but because her presence is helping you return to your own. And that, dear Gemini, is where the healing begins. Gate 2, the slow disappearance of self, when energy drain feels like your fault. Gemini, emotional exhaustion doesn't always come from overwork. Sometimes it comes from overexposure to someone else's chaos, to someone else's need, to someone else's story, repeated over and over, until you lose the sound of your own. At first, you think you're just tired. You tell yourself you're busy, distracted, maybe just emotionally overloaded from life. But slowly, quietly, the patterns emerge. You stop making decisions as easily as you used to. You second-guess messages before sending them. You take longer to reply. You feel paralyzed by simple tasks that used to bring joy. And yet, you don't see where it began. Gemini, let me tell you, it began with a presence that didn't belong in your inner circle. This woman, whoever she is in your life, has created an invisible pull on your field. You don't see ropes. You don't hear commands. But you feel drained every time you leave a conversation with her. It's not always overt. Sometimes it's a look that leaves you questioning yourself. Sometimes it's the tone that turns helpful words into subtle shaming. Sometimes it's the silence that follows your joy, as if your light somehow made her uncomfortable. And because you're Gemini, because you thrive on connection, you may have tried harder, spoken softer, offered more, until you slowly started to disappear. I've seen this happen before. I remember Alex, a Gemini client who was radiant, quick-witted, creative, always in motion. But when her close friend Jenna moved back to town, things began to shift. Jenna had a lot of problems, and Alex, being generous, being kind, became her listener, her rescuer, her emotional support system. The daily check-ins, the late-night calls, the constant processing. Alex thought she was just being loyal, until one day, she forgot her own birthday. Not literally, but energetically. She didn't plan anything, didn't celebrate, didn't even feel like herself. She told me, "I didn't realize how much I had been carrying until I let go of the weight that wasn't mine." Gemini, how many birthdays have you emotionally missed in your own life? How many dreams have you delayed because someone else's drama took up your mental space? How many times have you lowered your voice just to keep the peace? This is not a call to blame. This is a call to awaken. Because what makes this situation so dangerous is that it doesn't look like danger. It looks like care, like helpfulness, like she just needs someone to be there for her. But here's the truth you've been avoiding. You've been showing up for her far more than you've shown up for yourself. And it's not working. The more you give, the more she takes. The more you try to fix, the more broken things seem to become. The more you try to restore harmony, the more chaotic your own life begins to feel. That's the paradox of emotional enmeshment. You think you're helping, but you're actually enabling. You think you're being kind, but you're actually abandoning yourself. And I say this with love, Gemini, you're too valuable to be someone else's emotional battery pack. This pattern of depletion doesn't just affect you, it affects the people who love you. Your family, your partner, your friends. They begin to notice that you're not as present, not as joyful, not as you. And worst of all, you begin to believe that maybe you're just not capable anymore. That maybe the version of you that was sharp, expressive, playful is gone. But she's not gone. She's waiting. Underneath the layers of someone else's emotional baggage, she's still there. The real you. The free you. The you who knows how to say no without guilt. The you who trusts her intuition, even when others question it. So I ask you gently now, what would change if you believed that preserving your own energy is not selfish, but sacred? What if you allowed yourself to stop carrying people who aren't willing to walk beside you? What if you decided, today, that the most loving thing you could do for someone who drains you is to stop letting them? This is your moment of reclamation. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to explain it. You only need to choose it. Step back. Close the energetic gate. Return to your own frequency. Let her energy move on without attaching to yours. Because, Gemini, you deserve to wake up feeling clear again. You deserve to trust your decisions again. You deserve to feel like you again. And you will. As soon as you stop mistaking being depleted for being needed. Your presence is a gift. But not everyone is meant to receive it. The time has come to remember your worth, not in the eyes of someone else, but in the mirror of your own soul. And when you do, that old fog will begin to lift. And the real you, the vibrant, brilliant, beautifully free Gemini, will rise again. Gate 3. Sacred Boundaries. How Gemini reclaims the right to breathe. Gemini, let's speak about something that's often misunderstood: boundaries. Not the harsh kind that shut people out, but the gentle, sacred kind that protect your spirit from being swallowed whole. Because what you're navigating right now isn't just a difficult person. It's a slow erosion of your own selfhood, masked by your desire to be kind, to keep peace, to be there. But the truth is, presence without protection turns into depletion. And that's what's been happening to you. You didn't mean to open the gates so wide. You simply cared. You listened. You tried to understand. You extended grace, even when your intuition whispered that something felt off. But that's the thing about intuitive souls like you. When your nature is to connect, you forget that not everyone deserves direct access to your heart. That woman, the one whose chaos lingers long after the conversation ends, she didn't crash into your life like a storm. She crept in slowly, wrapped in familiarity or charm, cloaked in vulnerability. And because you are a Gemini, because your heart thrives on curiosity and human connection, you opened the door wide and said, "Come in." You didn't realize that while she was telling her stories, she was siphoning your clarity. While she was unpacking her emotions, she was leaving her bags in your space. And slowly, quietly, you began to feel foggy, emotionally disoriented, unsure why your spark dimmed. But here's the part that matters most. You do not need to stay in that dynamic. You are not required to keep showing up at the altar of someone else's emotional drama. Your peace does not exist to cushion their instability. And your silence is not a sign of compassion when it becomes consent to your own unraveling. Boundaries, dear Gemini, are not walls to keep love out. They're agreements that honor the love you've been neglecting to give yourself. So, how do you begin to reclaim that love? Not with confrontation or aggression, but with quiet clarity. Start with the recognition that you don't need to justify needing space. You don't owe an explanation for your own healing. The moment you acknowledge that it's not your job to be someone's emotional life raft, you begin to rise back into your own skin. One of the most powerful steps is to prepare yourself energetically. Before a call, a meeting, or even reading a message from this person, pause. Inhale deeply. Envision a circle of golden light wrapping around you like a shield, not to push others away, but to remind your own energy not to leave your body and follow someone else's pain. This visualization isn't fantasy. It's focus. It's you choosing deliberately not to absorb what isn't yours. And when the conversation begins to drift into the familiar chaos, resist the urge to fix. When she offers drama, don't respond with solutions. When she compares herself to others or subtly criticizes your choices, don't justify yourself. Instead, respond gently but firmly. That sounds like something only you can truly figure out. Then shift the energy. This isn't coldness. This is leadership. Emotional leadership. Because the more you allow yourself to be dragged into someone else's story, the more you lose the narrative of your own. Start trimming the time you spend engaging. You don't have to disappear. Just decrease the dosage. What used to be 2-hour calls can become 20-minute check-ins. What used to be weekly meetings can become once-a-month updates. If she protests, if she accuses you of changing, remind yourself silently, yes, I am changing. I'm choosing myself. You see, the discomfort others feel when you finally set boundaries is often just the echo of their dependence on your lack of them. It's not your responsibility to manage that discomfort. It's your responsibility to stay aligned with your truth. And if your truth is tired, heavy, or uninspired, then it's time to recenter. As your energy begins to return, you'll notice subtle but profound shifts. You'll wake up feeling clearer. You'll feel the impulse to create, to laugh, to move freely again. This is not coincidence. This is recovery. Your nervous system is recalibrating from constant alert to peace. Your soul is stretching in a space that finally feels like home. And yes, there will be moments of guilt. Your mind may whisper, you're being selfish. But I'm here to remind you, boundaries are not selfish. They are sacred declarations of worth. And you, dear Gemini, are worthy of breathing without asking permission. Protecting your energy doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you've decided to stop bleeding for people who only show up with open hands. This is your turning point. This is where the version of you that was always giving, always pleasing, always overextending, gently steps back and whispers, no more. And from that quiet no, a brighter yes will be born. Gate 4. When you let go of the drain, the divine will send you the aligned. Gemini, you've done the hardest part. You've taken your power back from what drained you. You've walked away from the subtle manipulations, the quiet invasions of your peace, the performance of emotional caretaking that wore you down. And now, something extraordinary is beginning to happen, something you might not have expected. In the soft spaces left behind by your boundaries, new energy is starting to move. It doesn't demand. It doesn't beg. It simply arrives, aligned, effortless, whole. The truth is, the moment you stop entertaining chaos disguised as connection, you make space for sacred encounters. But the universe never sends these gifts when your hands are full of people who don't value them. You had to first release the person who consumed your light to prepare for the one who reflects it back to you. That is what Gate 4 is about. Divine redirection, soul-level meeting, and the unexpected arrival of someone who speaks the language of your spirit. One Gemini woman I once guided, Elena, had spent years entangled with a colleague who constantly made her feel small, questioned her creativity, and dismissed her intuition. After she broke the emotional loop and began setting strong, energetic boundaries, she found herself alone. Lonely even, but not for long. 1 month later, she met someone in the most mundane of places, at a bookstore, reaching for the same journal. That brief interaction turned into a deep, soul-nourishing friendship with a woman who would later become her business partner and spiritual sister. The contrast stunned her. For the first time, she told me, I didn't feel the need to prove, perform, or pretend. I could just be. And she met me there. That's the magic of healthy relationships, Gemini. They don't demand your exhaustion. They support your expansion. And when you finally create space, the universe doesn't delay. It sends aligned connections like rivers to dry soil, eager to fill, not to drown. But here's the part you must prepare for. When this aligned person enters, they will feel unfamiliar. Not because they are strange, but because they don't trigger your wounds. You're used to surviving on adrenaline, managing expectations, dancing between diplomacy and exhaustion. This new connection won't require any of that. And at first, your nervous system may not know what to do with that much calm. You may question it. You may even push it away. Don't. Stay open. Let yourself feel what it's like to be held without tension, to be heard without interruption, to be understood without having to explain. This is the kind of connection your soul has craved beneath the noise of all those one-sided relationships. This is what you were meant for, not fixing others, but meeting those who are already whole, not carrying burdens, but walking alongside souls who carry their own, not losing sleep over who you are to them, but resting in the peace of who you are together. This is the kind of divine alignment that happens when you live in truth. And it doesn't stop with one person. You'll begin to attract people who see your duality as a gift, not a flaw. People who celebrate both your intellect and your emotions. People who bring laughter without expectation, presence without pressure. You will notice a shift in your friendships, in your collaborations, even in how strangers respond to you. Why? Because you are no longer broadcasting, "I'm available for depletion." You are now radiating, "I'm a sanctuary of light." And the ones meant for you will know how to enter that sanctuary with reverence. But even in this blooming, there's still a responsibility to maintain what you've learned, to not fall back into old habits of overgiving, to stay in alignment with your worth, to remember that even divine connections require conscious care. This is your new emotional ecosystem, Gemini. One where you are no longer the only one watering the garden. One where the harvest is shared. One where you no longer shrink to fit, but expand to receive. Let me say this clearly, because I want you to hear it in your bones. You are not hard to love. You were simply trying to be loved in the wrong rooms. And now you've left those rooms. Now the right doors are opening. You'll recognize them not by how excited they make you feel, but by how safe. Not by how fast things move, but by how still your soul becomes in their presence. This, Gemini, is what the universe wanted for you all along. Conclusion: returning to the center of your truth. Gemini, if you've made it here, I want to honor your heart. You didn't just listen, you felt. You allowed yourself to question patterns that were once familiar, and in doing so, you began the sacred act of coming home to yourself. That's what this entire journey has been about. Not punishment, not isolation, not loss, but realignment, recovery, reclamation. You see, you were never meant to carry someone else's chaos as proof of your compassion. You were meant to be a mirror of clarity, a wellspring of insight, a radiant messenger who walks with both logic and magic. And somewhere in the dance of giving, you forgot that your presence was a gift, not a currency. But now you remember. Now you see. You've learned to sense when energy feels off, even if words say the right things. You've learned that not all kindness is innocent, and not all smiles are sacred. And most of all, you've learned that setting boundaries is not cruelty, it's courage. It's wisdom. It's protection for the softest parts of you that deserve to thrive, not survive. As you move forward, I ask you to return to this truth whenever guilt whispers or doubt creeps in. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to choose wholeness over familiarity. And if this message resonated with your soul, if it lit up a space inside you that had gone dim, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who might need this awakening, and subscribe to stay close to the guidance that honors your healing. You are not just a Gemini. You are a soul rediscovering its sacred rhythm. And I'll be here, every step of the way, as you walk back into your light.